9/11 conspiracy theories are conspiracy theories that attribute the planning and execution of the September 11 attacks against the United States to parties other than, or in addition to, al-Qaeda, including that there was advance knowledge of the attacks among high-level government officials. Government investigations and independent reviews have rejected these theories. Proponents of these theories claim there are inconsistencies in the commonly accepted version, or evidence that was either ignored or overlooked. The most prominent conspiracy theory is that the collapse of the Twin Towers and 7 World Trade Center were the result of a controlled demolition rather than structural failure due to impact and fire. Another prominent belief is that the Pentagon was hit by a missile launched by elements from inside the U.S. government, or that a commercial airliner was allowed to do so via an effective stand-down of the American military. Possible motives claimed by conspiracy theorists for such actions include justifying the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq, even though the U.S. government concluded Iraq was not involved in the attacks, to advance their geostrategic interests, such as plans to construct a natural gas pipeline through Afghanistan. Other conspiracy theories revolve around authorities having advance knowledge of the attacks and deliberately ignoring or assisting the attackers. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, and the technology magazine Popular Mechanics have investigated and rejected the claims made by 9/11 conspiracy theorists. The 9/11 Commission and some of the civil engineering community accept that the impacts of jet aircraft at high speeds in combination with subsequent fires, not controlled demolition, led to the collapse of the Twin Towers, but some groups disagree with the arguments made by NIST and Popular Mechanics, including architects and engineers for 9/11's truth. Background: 9/11's conspiracy theorists reject some or all of the following facts about the 9/11's attacks. Al-Qaeda suicide operatives hijacked and crashed United Airlines Flight 175 and American Airlines Flight 11 into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, and crashed American Airlines Flight 77 into the Pentagon. The impact and resulting fires caused the collapse of the Twin Towers and the destruction and damage of other buildings in the World Trade Center complex. The Pentagon was severely damaged by the impact of the airliner and the resulting fire. The hijackers also crashed a fourth plane into a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, after the passengers and flight crew attempted to regain control of the aircraft. Pre-attack warnings of varying detail of the planned attacks against the United States by al-Qaeda were ignored due to a lack of communication between various law enforcement and intelligence personnel. For the lack of interagency communication, the 9/11's report cited bureaucratic inertia and laws passed in the 1970s to prevent abuses that caused scandals during that era, most notably the Watergate scandal. The report faulted both the Clinton and the Bush administrations with failure of imagination. This consensus view is backed by various sources, including the reports from government investigations, the 9/11's Commission report, that incorporated intelligence information from the earlier FBI investigation, Pent Bomb, and the Joint Inquiry of 2002, and the studies into building performance carried out by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. Investigations by non-government organizations that support the accepted accounts, such as those by scientists at Purdue University. Articles supporting these facts and theories appearing in magazines such as Popular Mechanics, Scientific American, and Time. Similar articles in news media throughout the world, including the Times of India, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, the BBC, Le Monde, Deutsche Welle, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, ABC, and the Chosun Ilbo of South Korea. History. Since the attacks, a variety of conspiracy theories have been put forward in websites, books, and films. Many groups and individuals advocating 9/11's conspiracy theories identify as part of the 9/11's truth movement. Within 6 hours of the attack, a suggestion appeared on an internet chat room suggesting that the collapse of the towers looked like an act of controlled demolition. If, in a few days, not one official has mentioned anything about the controlled demolition part, the author wrote, I think we have a really serious problem. The first theories that emerged focused primarily on various perceived anomalies in the publicly available evidence, and proponents later developed more specific theories about an alleged plot. One false allegation that was widely circulated by email and on the web is that not a single Jew had been killed in the attack and that therefore the attacks must have been the work of the Mossad, not Islamic terrorists. The first elaborated theories appeared in Europe. 1 week after the attacks, the inside job theory was the subject of a thesis by a researcher from the French National Centre for Scientific Research published in Le Monde. Other theories sprang from the far corners of the globe within weeks. 6 months after the attacks, Thierry Masson's piece on September 11, L'effroyable imposture, topped the French bestseller list. Its publication in English, as 9/11, The Big Lie, received little attention, but it remains one of the principal sources for trutherism. 2003 saw the publication of the CIA and September 11 by former German State Minister Andreas von Bülow and Operation 9/11 by the German journalist Gerhard Wisniewski. Both books are published by Matthias Brockers, who was at the time an editor at the German newspaper Die Tageszeitung. While these theories were popular in Europe, they were treated by the U.S. media with either bafflement or amusement, and they were dismissed by the U.S. government as the product of anti-Americanism. In an address to the United Nations on November 10, 2001, United States President George W. Bush denounced the emergence of outrageous conspiracy theories that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty. The 9/11's conspiracy theories started out mostly in the political left but have broadened into what New York Magazine describes as terra incognita, where left and right meet, fusing 60s counter-cultural distrust with the don't tread on me variety. By 2004, conspiracy theories about the September 11 attacks began to gain ground in the United States. One explanation is that the rise in popularity stemmed more from growing criticism of the Iraq War and the newly re-elected President George W. Bush than from any discovery of new or more compelling evidence or an improvement in the technical quality of the presentation of the theories. Knight Ridder News theorized that revelations that weapons of mass destruction did not exist in Iraq, the belated release of the President's Daily Brief of August 6, 2001, and reports that NORAD had lied to the 9/11's Commission, may have fueled the conspiracy theories. Between 2004 and the 5th anniversary of the September 11 attacks in 2006, mainstream coverage of the conspiracy theories increased. The U.S. government issued a formal analysis by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, of the collapse of the World Trade Center. To address the growing publicity of the theories, the State Department revised a web page in 2006 to debunk them. A 2006 National Security Strategy paper declared that terrorism springs from subcultures of conspiracy and misinformation, and that terrorists recruit more effectively from populations whose information about the world is contaminated by falsehoods and corrupted by conspiracy theories. The distortions keep alive grievances and filter out facts that would challenge popular prejudices and selfing propaganda. Al-Qaeda has repeatedly claimed responsibility for the attacks, with Chief Deputy Ayman al-Zawahiri accusing Shia Iran and Hezbollah of denigrating Sunni successes in hurting America by intentionally starting rumors that Israel carried out the attacks. Some of the conspiracy theories about the September 11 attacks do not involve representational strategies typical of many conspiracy theories that establish a clear dichotomy between good and evil, or guilty and innocent. Instead, they call up gradations of negligence and complicity. Matthias Brockers, an early proponent of such theories, dismisses the commonly accepted account of the September 11th attacks as being itself a conspiracy theory that seeks to reduce complexity, disentangle what is confusing, and explain the inexplicable. Just before the 5th anniversary of the attacks, mainstream news outlets released a flurry of articles on the growth of 9/11's conspiracy theories, with an article in Time stating that his is not a fringe phenomenon. It is a mainstream political reality. Several surveys have included questions about beliefs related to the September 11th attacks. In 2008, 9/11's conspiracy theories topped a greatest conspiracy theory list compiled by the Daily Telegraph. The list was ranked by following and traction. In 2010, the International Center for 9/11 Studies, a private organization that is said to be sympathetic to conspiracy theories, successfully sued for the release of videos collected by NIST of the attacks and aftermath. According to the German daily Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, the videos that were published shortly before the 9th anniversary of the attacks provide new food for conspiracy theorists. Many of the videos show images of 7 World Trade Center, a skyscraper in the vicinity of the WTC towers that also collapsed on September 11, 2001. Eyewitnesses have repeatedly reported explosions happening before the collapse of both of the towers, while experts consider these theories to be unreasonable. 9/11's truth figures Stephen E. Jones and Mike Berger have further added that the death of Osama bin Laden did not change their questions about the attacks, nor provide closure. According to writer Jeremy Stahl, since Bush left office, the overall number of believers in 9/11's conspiracy theories has dipped, while the number of people who believe in the most radical theories has held fairly steady. Types. The most prominent conspiracy theories can be broadly divided into 3 main forms. LIHOP, let it happen on purpose, suggests that key individuals within the government had at least some foreknowledge of the attacks and deliberately ignored it or actively weakened United States defenses to ensure the hijacked flights were not intercepted. Similar allegations were made about Pearl Harbor. MIHOP, made it happen on purpose, that key individuals within the government planned the attacks and collaborated with, or framed, al-Qaeda in carrying them out. There is a range of opinions about how this might have been achieved. Others who reject the accepted account of the September 11th attacks are not proposing specific theories, but try to demonstrate that the U.S. government's account of the events is wrong. This, according to them, would lead to a general call for a new official investigation into the events of September 11, 2001. According to Jonathan Kay, managing editor for comment at the Canadian newspaper National Post and author of the Among the Truthers, A Journey Through America's Growing Conspiracist Underground, they feel their job is to show everybody that the official theory of 9/11 is wrong. And then, when everybody is convinced, then the population will rise up and demand a new investigation with government resources, and that investigation will tell us what actually happened. Theories. Foreknowledge. Conspiracy theorists claim that action or inaction by U.S. officials with foreknowledge was intended to ensure that the attacks took place successfully. For example, Michael Meacher, former British Environment Minister and member of Tony Blair's cabinet, said that the United States knowingly failed to prevent the attacks. Suspected insider trading. Some conspiracy theorists maintain that just before 9/11, an extraordinary amount of put options were placed on United Airlines and American Airlines stocks and speculate that insiders may have known in advance of the coming events of 9/11 and placed their bets accordingly. An analysis into the possibility of insider trading on September 11 concludes that a measure of abnormal long put volume was also examined and seen to be at abnormally high levels in the days leading up to the attacks. Consequently, the paper concludes that there is evidence of unusual option market activity in the days leading up to September 11 that is consistent with investors trading on advance knowledge of the attacks. Alan M. Podeshman, The Journal of Business. This study was intended to address the great deal of speculation about whether option market activity indicated that the terrorists or their associates had traded in the days leading up to September 11 on advance knowledge of the impending attacks. In the days leading up to 9/11, analysis shows a rise in the put-to-call ratio for United Airlines and American Airlines, the two airlines from which planes were hijacked on September 11. Between September 6 and 7, the Chicago Board Options Exchange recorded purchases of 4,744 put option contracts in UAL and 396 call options. On September 10, more trading in Chicago saw the purchase of 4,516 put options in American Airlines, the other airline involved in the hijackings, with a mere 748 call options in American purchased that day. No other airline companies has unusual put-to-call ratio in the days leading up to the attacks. The 9/11 Commission concluded that all these abnormal patterns in trading were coincidental. Insurance companies saw anomalous trading activities as well. Citigroup Incorporated, which has estimated that its travelers' insurance unit may pay $500 million in claims from the World Trade Center attack, had about 45 times the normal volume during 3 trading days before the attack for options that profit, if the stock falls below $40. Citigroup shares fell $1.25 in late trading to $38.09. Morgan Stanley, which occupied 22 floors at the World Trade Center, experienced bigger than normal pre-attack trading of options that profited when stock prices fell. Other companies directly affected by the tragedy had similar jumps. Raytheon, a defense contractor, had an anomalously high number of call options trading on September 10. A Raytheon option that makes money, if shares are more than $25 each, had 232 options contracts traded on the day before the attacks, almost 6 times the total number of trades that had occurred before that day. The initial options were bought through at least 2 brokerage firms, including NFS, a subsidiary of Fidelity Investments, and TD Waterhouse. It was estimated that the trader or traders would have realized a $5 million profit. The Securities and Exchange Commission launched an insider trading investigation in which Osama bin Laden was a suspect after receiving information from at least one Wall Street firm. The 9/11 Commission report concluded that exhaustive investigations by the Securities and Exchange Commission, FBI, and other agencies have uncovered no evidence that anyone with advance knowledge of the attacks profited through securities transactions. The report further stated, highly publicized allegations of insider trading in advance of 9/11 generally rest on reports of unusual pre-9/11 trading activity in companies whose stock plummeted after the attacks. Some unusual trading did in fact occur, but each such trade proved to have an innocuous explanation. For example, the volume of put options investments that pay off only when a stock drops in price surged in the parent companies of United Airlines on September 6 and American Airlines on September 10, highly suspicious trading on its face. Yet, further investigation has revealed that the trading had no connection with 9/11. A single U.S.-based institutional investor with no conceivable ties to al-Qaeda purchased 95% of the UAL puts on September 6 as part of a trading strategy that also included buying 115,000 shares of American on September 10. Similarly, much of the seemingly suspicious trading in American on September 10 was traced to a specific U.S.-based options trading newsletter, faxed to its subscribers on Sunday, September 9, which recommended these trades. These examples typify the evidence examined by the investigation. The SEC and the FBI, aided by other agencies and the securities industry, devoted enormous resources to investigating this issue, including securing the cooperation of many foreign governments. These investigators have found that the apparently suspicious consistently proved innocuous. Air defense stand-down theory. A common claim among conspiracy theorists is that the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, issued a stand-down order or deliberately scrambled fighters late to allow the hijacked airplanes to reach their targets without interference. According to this theory, NORAD had the capability of locating and intercepting planes on September 11, and its failure to do so indicates a government conspiracy to allow the attacks to occur. Conspiracy theorist Mark R. Elzes says, there is only one explanation for this. Our Air Force was ordered to stand down on 9/11. One of the first actions taken by the hijackers on September 11 was to turn off or disable each of the 4 aircraft's onboard transponders. Without these transponder signals to identify the airplane's tail number, altitude, and speed, the hijacked airplanes would have been only blips among 4,500 other blips on NORAD's radar screens, making them very difficult to track. On September 11, only 14 fighter jets were on alert in the contiguous 48 states. There was no automated method for the civilian air traffic controllers to alert NORAD. A passenger airline had not been hijacked in the U.S. since 1979. They had to pick up the phone and literally dial us, says Major Douglas Martin, public affairs officer for NORAD. Only one civilian plane, a chartered Learjet 35 with golfer Payne Stewart and 5 others on board, was intercepted by NORAD over North America in the decade prior to 9/11, which took 1 hour and 19 minutes. Rules in effect at that time, and on September 11, barred supersonic flight on intercepts. Before 9/11, all other NORAD interceptions were limited to Offshore Air Defense Identification Zones, ADIZ. Until 9/11 there was no domestic ADIZ, says FAA spokesman Bill Schumann. After 9/11, the FAA and NORAD increased cooperation. They set up hotlines between command centers while NORAD increased its fighter coverage and installed radar to watch airspace over the continent. The longest warning NORAD received of the hijackings was some 8 minutes for American Airlines Flight 11, the first flight hijacked. The FAA alerted NORAD to the hijacked Flight 175 at just about the same time it was crashing into the World Trade Center's South Tower. The FAA notified NORAD of the missing not hijacked Flight 77 3 minutes before it struck the Pentagon. NORAD received no warning of the hijack of United Flight 93 until 3 minutes after it had crashed in Pennsylvania. Israeli agents. It has been claimed that Israeli agents may have had foreknowledge of the attacks. 4 hours after the attack, the FBI arrested 5 Israelis who had been filming the smoking skyline from the roof of a white van in the parking lot of an apartment building, for puzzling behavior. The Israelis were videotaping the events, and one bystander said they acted in a suspicious manner. They were like happy, you know. They didn't look shocked to me. I thought it was very strange. While The Forward, a New York Jewish news magazine, reported that the FBI concluded that 2 of the men were Israeli intelligence operatives, a spokesperson for the Israeli embassy in the United States said that they had not been involved in any intelligence operation in the United States. The FBI eventually concluded that the 5 Israelis had no foreknowledge of the attacks. World Trade Center. The plane crashes and resulting fires caused the collapse of the World Trade Center. Controlled demolition conspiracy theories say the collapse of the North Tower, South Tower, or of 7 World Trade Center was caused by explosives installed in the buildings in advance. Demolition theory proponents, such as Brigham Young University physicist Stephen E. Jones, architect Richard Gage, software engineer Jim Hoffman, and theologian David Ray Griffin, argue that the aircraft impacts and resulting fires could not have weakened the buildings sufficiently to initiate a catastrophic collapse, and that the buildings would not have collapsed completely, nor at the speeds that they did, without additional factors weakening the structures. In the article Active Thermotic Material Discovered in Dust from the 9/11 World Trade Center Catastrophe, which appeared in the Open Chemical Physics Journal. Authors Niels Harrit of the University of Copenhagen's Department of Chemistry, Geoffrey Ferrer of Brigham Young University's Department of Physics and Astronomy, Stephen E. Jones, and others state that thermite and nanothermite composites in the dust and debris were found following the collapse of the three buildings, which they conclude to be proof that explosives brought down the buildings. The article contained no scientific rebuttal and the editor-in-chief of the publication subsequently resigned. Jones has not explained how the amount of explosive needed to do this could have been positioned in the two buildings without drawing attention, but mentioned efforts to research the building's maintenance activity in the weeks prior to the event. Federal investigators at the National Institute of Standards and Technology state that enormous quantities of thermite would have to be applied to the structural columns to damage them, but Jones disputed this, saying that he and others were investigating superthermite. Brent Blanchard, author of A History of Explosive Demolition in America, who corresponded with Jones, states that questions about the viability of Jones' theories remain unanswered, such as the fact that no demolition personnel noticed any telltale signs of thermite during the 8 months of debris removal following the tower's collapse. Blanchard also said that a verifiable chain of possession needs to be established for the tested beams, which did not occur with the beams Jones tested, raising questions of whether the metal pieces tested could have been cut away from the debris pile with acetylene torches, shears, or other potentially contaminated equipment while on site, or exposed to trace amounts of thermite or other compounds while being handled, while in storage, or while being transferred from ground zero to memorial sites. Jones also said that molten steel found in the rubble was evidence of explosives, as an ordinary airplane fire would not generate enough heat to produce this, citing photographs of red debris being removed by construction equipment, but Blanchard said that if there had been any molten steel in the rubble, any excavation equipment encountering it would have been immediately damaged. Other sampling of the pulverized dust by United States Geological Survey and R.J. Lee did not report any evidence of thermite or explosives. It has been theorized the thermite material found was primer paint. Dave Thomas of Skeptical Inquirer magazine, noting that the residue in question was claimed to be thermotic because of its iron oxide and aluminum composition, pointed out that these substances are found in many items common to the towers. Thomas said that in order to cut through a vertical steel beam, special high-temperature containment must be added to prevent the molten iron from dropping down, and that the thermite reaction is too slow for it to be practically used in building demolition. Thomas pointed out that when Jesse Ventura hired New Mexico Tech to conduct a demonstration showing nanothermite slicing through a large steel beam, the nanothermite produced copious flame and smoke but no damage to the beam, even though it was in a horizontal, and therefore optimal position. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, concluded the accepted version was more than sufficient to explain the collapse of the buildings. NIST and many scientists refuse to debate conspiracy theorists because they feel it would give those theories unwarranted credibility. Specialists in structural mechanics and structural engineering accept the model of a fire-induced, gravity-driven collapse of the World Trade Center buildings without the use of explosives. As a result, NIST said that it did not perform any test for the residue of explosive compounds of any kind in the debris. Soon after the day of the attacks, major media sources published that the towers had collapsed due to heat melting the steel. Knowledge that the burning temperatures of jet fuel would not melt the steel support structure of the WTC contributed to the belief among skeptics that the towers would not have collapsed without external interference, something other than the planes. NIST does not claim that the steel was melted, but rather that the weakened steel, together with the damage caused by the plane's impacts, caused the collapses. NIST reported that a simulation model based on the assumption that combustible vapors burned immediately upon mixing with the incoming oxygen showed that at any given location, the duration of temperatures near 1000 degrees Celsius was about 15 to 20. The rest of the time, the calculated temperatures were 500 degrees Celsius or below. The ability of an uncontrolled blaze to cause the collapse of a steel-framed high-rise building was demonstrated by the destruction of the Plasco building in Tehran, Iran on January 19, 2017. The Pentagon. Political activist Thierry Masson and filmmaker Dylan Avery claim that American Airlines Flight 77 did not crash into the Pentagon. Instead, they argue that the Pentagon was hit by a missile launched by elements from inside the U.S. government. Some claim that the holes in the Pentagon walls were far too small to have been made by a Boeing 757. How does a plane 125 feet wide and 155 feet long fit into a hole which is only 60 feet across? Masson's book, L'effroyable imposture, published in English as 9/11, The Big Lie, became available in more than a dozen languages. When released, the book was heavily criticized by both the mainstream French and American press, and later, from within the 9/11 truth movement. The French newspaper Libération called the book a tissue of wild and irresponsible allegations, entirely without foundation. In response to the conspiracy theorists' claim of a missile hitting the Pentagon, meatuses, a professor of civil engineering at Purdue University, argues that a crashing jet doesn't punch a cartoon-like outline of itself into a reinforced concrete building. When Flight 77 hit the Pentagon, one wing hit the ground and the other was sheared off by the Pentagon's load-bearing columns. According to Architecture Week, the reason the Pentagon took relatively little damage from the impact was because Wedge 1 had recently been renovated. This was part of a renovation program which had been begun in the 1980s, and Wedge 1 was the first of 5 to be renovated. Evidence contradicting some conspiracy theorists' claim of a missile hitting the Pentagon have been described by researchers within the 9/11 truth movement, such as Jim Hoffman, in his essay The Pentagon Attack, What the Physical Evidence Shows, and by others broadly refuting the role of other conspiracies in the attacks. The evidence refuting missile claims includes airplane debris including Flight 77's black boxes, the nose cone, landing gear, an airplane tire, and an intact cockpit seat were observed at the crash site. The remains of passengers from Flight 77 were indeed found at the Pentagon crash site and their identities confirmed by DNA analysis. Many eyewitnesses saw the plane strike the Pentagon. Further, Flight 77 passengers made phone calls reporting that their airplane had been hijacked. For example, passenger Renee May called her mother to tell her that the plane had been hijacked and that the passengers had been herded to the back of the plane. Another passenger named Barbara Olson called her husband, U.S. Solicitor General Theodore Olson, and said that the flight had been hijacked, and that the hijackers had knives and box cutters. Some conspiracy theories say the phone calls the passengers made were fabricated by voice morphing, the passengers' bodies disposed of, and a missile fired at the Pentagon. The pressure group Judicial Watch filed a Freedom of Information Act request on December 15, 2004, to force the government to release video recordings from the Sheraton National Hotel, the Nixcom/Citgo gas station, Pentagon security cameras and the Virginia Department of Transportation. On May 16, 2006, the government released the Pentagon security camera videos to Judicial Watch. The image of American Airlines Flight 77 which appears in the videos has been described as white blob and a white streak, by the BBC, a thin white blur, by the Associated Press, and a silver speck low to the ground, in the Washington Post. A sequence of 5 frames fro.
Please subscribe and thanks for watching.